podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to Howie the Podcast from Roker Report. And today, once again, we continue to run through our top 10 series where we shamelessly steal the match of the day top 10 format and apply a Sunderland twist to it. So today, having done, I think we've done managers, we've done strikers, we might have done one more, can't remember, but today we need to set out our defensive stalls because we're going to be ordering the top 10 Sunderland centre-halves of the Stadium of Light era. So once again, I'm not going to do this alone. To help me, I have three gentlemen who are willing to stick their neck out and provide their views on who they think was the best central defenders to play for the club since we moved home way back in 1997. So first up, we have the man whose views have been heard on all of these top 10 so far. And while doing so, he has managed to sway public opinion on many people, I think, who he's ranked during the course of these top 10s. It is, of course, Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Chris. I didn't know I'd swayed public opinion. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
It does. Well, you know, this is the thing. Like everyone's got a view on these things, and you know, when you start explaining it, I think there was one in the last one, and I can't remember who it was, but I'm sure Ian Murter, when somebody did the argument, I think it might have been Kelvin, the Simon Mignolet. Oh, and the keepers one. And Ian Murter was like, yeah, actually, now you've said that, I maybe should have had him higher. But it's funny, isn't it, Andrew, with people's opinions, when you put your argument across, people go, yeah, actually, I'm having that.
Well, that's the point of it, isn't it? It's all opinions. I mean, that's what we always say about football. But if you make a half-decent argument and you make it well, people are going to listen and maybe take it on board. And yes, if that means I'm changing public opinion, so be it. I'll just carry that on my shoulders, you know.
That's it. I mean, just quickly, Andrew, out of interest, managers, strikers, keepers, central defenders. Where does this one rank? I mean, is this one more difficult than the other three?
Oh, yeah, really, really difficult, Chris. I mean, everybody else is talking about transfer links at the moment, and Sunderland is signing the best players in Europe. And us four, on our chats, all we're talking about is ranking defenders. And, you know, my phone's melting because I'm getting messages off Johnny and Kelvin saying, oh, you can't have him in the top 10 if so-and-so's getting left out. So, yeah, it was hotly contested, this one.
Yeah. I mean, I do need to remember to get myself a life at some point rather than spend weekends kind of sorting this stuff out. And talk about melting, by the way. We're doing this on the hottest day of the year, by the way. So we'll see if we don't melt before the end of this. But next up, we have another regular voice from our On This Week series where stories are becoming legendary. There's, of course, Kelvin Beattie. Hello, Kelvin.
Morning. Listen, your introduction there. Andrew definitely is changing public opinion.
He is, isn't he? Yeah.
Because I was hearing this morning and reading this morning in the papers that Lee Johnson's going to get a statue built for him. Is that right now?
Well, you see, I was moving away from the whole Lee Johnson situation, and I hope you notice, Andrew. I asked you those questions without mentioning his name.
It's quite all right. Kelvin's giggling away there. He's had his fun out of it, so that's fine.
As long as he's happy. But just quickly on the centre halves, ranking them, Kelvin. It is a real strange one, and it's similar to strikers in some ways, where sometimes these people come as a pair.
Aye, yeah, and that definitely crept into my thinking. Who played well with who? Who else? You probably hear me say as we're going through this, who else was around at the time that they were playing? Because I think that makes a difference both positively and negatively to how you rank some of these lads. And the boys that didn't play many, that didn't make many appearances, I had a bit of a difficulty with that, you know. Because sometimes people were right at the top of the list and then they were right at the bottom of the list when you hit that, what was the appearance stat like, you know? It was difficult. It was difficult.
Yeah. I mean, again, just quickly, Calvin, on ranking central defenders, because I don't know about you, when I was starting to think about this, when I was starting to think what order I put things in, you're talking about eras, and actually, when I was young, and again, we're going to sound like dinosaurs, but I'm talking about the caliber of centre forward, because I don't think the centre forward really exists anymore in some ways. If you look at who defenders play up against now, but you look 25 years ago maybe, and these guys were playing against a front two. Like if you look at Arsenal, your Bergkamps, your Anelkas, they might have played up front together. Ian Wright. You're talking about partnerships. You're talking about I want to immediately saying Shearer Ferdinand too. I thought as much as they played for the Mags, I mean, two unbelievable players together. The partnerships up front. Man United used to have 4 top-class strikers all kind of interchanging during games. And none of that exists anymore now.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think you had to be up for the scrap, up for the fight as a centre-half. We often said when we're talking about goalkeepers, they make one mistake and it's a goal. I tell you, that era, you're talking about one mistake and it's probably a goal. If they didn't get it right. So you had to be up for the scrap and up for the battle. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And moving on to our last guest, because also joining us, and someone we're always glad when he finds the time for little old Howie the podcast in his busy podcast schedule. And he's also the reason we're only going back to the beginning of the Stadium of Light era. And even then it's pushing the boundaries a little bit. It is, of course, Johnny Hawley. Hello, Johnny.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah,
hello.
It is. I am possibly pushing the envelope a little bit as the sort of younger representative, with the Stadium of Light opening in '97 and me being born a year after that. It's hazy memories of the first couple of seasons. I think it's fair to say, but I think I can back up at least 90% of my list. I reckon maybe 80.
God, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hate young'uns, honestly. Absolutely hate them. But I mean, it must be, just on the point I was talking to Calvin about, Johnny, you've really seen that actually from start to finish. Because we've gone probably through a couple of more evolutions of football, let's say. But you've probably seen that. You probably started watching football when, 2 strikers up front. And your, I suppose, footballing experience has been that whole development between having 2 strikers and having none at all, almost.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, when I first started watching football, everybody was playing 4-4-2. That was just, it wasn't even a question. There was no debate about, maybe we'll line up in this shape or maybe we'll do that. It was just, no. Who's playing in the 4-4-2? That was the question every week. And yeah, now, I mean, maybe the strikers are making a little bit of a comeback. I feel like a lot of, big teams, especially this summer, are all kind of like, who's after a big striker? There's not as many about, but certainly maybe the mid-2010s to now, there's been a real drop-off in the availability and quality of strikers, and going from, like you say, to one up top and then sometimes none up top. It does make it difficult to evaluate these centre-halves, because much like Kelvin was saying, a lot of it depends on who's around them. It also depends who's in front of them. So yeah, it's a tough one, because unlike with a list like strikers where you can look at goals and there's a pretty obvious kind of objective measure you can start thinking about, with centre backs, it's a lot more, I think, opinion based and a lot more about how you rated their style of play and stuff. So yeah, I found this one difficult.
Christ, I was just thinking about thought that depressed us there. You can't even remember 1 to 11. I mean,
Hey, I did play Sunday League,
honestly.
We didn't have 99 squad numbers on the back of them kits. That was very much 1 to 11.
Where you could see, you saw people's number and you went, well, they're 11, they're on the left, they're 7, they're on the right.
Yes, that's still the way I number me players on Football Manager. Just for a fusion of older and younger, all right? I'm still a traditionalist with squad numbers, don't worry.
And your centre-half always wanted number. Well, I was a centre-half at school in Sunday League. I always wanted the number 5 when the 5 came out.
Yeah, I wanted 5 as well. Yeah,
that was always the one. But again, just last point, Johnny, because again, talking about that evolution, in terms of centre-halves, Kelvin touched on it, that back then they needed to be up for the battle. I think centre halves look a lot differently now and play a lot differently because talk about your Man Cities of the world, and actually I think it was Gary Neville who went on a rant at some point that actually they've got more possession of the ball than the attacking players who you want on the ball, really.
Yeah, the archetype of a centre half's changed massively, hasn't it? Even you look within our own current squad, and you probably look at somebody like Dan Ballard, who 20 years ago he just was your poster boy of a centre half. You know, big, strong, brilliant in the air, good in the challenge, reads the game. You know, that was what you wanted. Whereas now you've got somebody like Luke O'Nien who can thrive alongside him, who's under 6 foot tall. He's not winning every single aerial battle. He's not out muscling people all the time. He's great on the ball. He can pick a pass sort of 60, 70 yards away with his wrong foot. You know, you wouldn't have seen maybe the top centre-halves 20, 25 years ago, but you certainly wouldn't have seen championship players, 20 years ago, pinging 60-yard passes with a weak foot down to the opposite wing. So, yeah, it's been a huge change, and you know, I think you can argue it makes the game more watchable. But I think you lose something from a defence when you lose those type of characters who would have been your stock centre halves back in the day.
Yeah, like Paul Butler, who was signed the year you were born. But anyway, that's a depressing thought. But anyway, let's crack on. Because as I said, we're shamelessly stealing the match of the day, top 10 format. So anyone not familiar, we're going to pick a subject to rank, which in this case, as we said, is the top 10 Sunderland AFC centre halves of the Stadium of Light era. So first, what we had to do was shorten that list down to 10, which was a job in itself, by the way. And then in today's pod, we're going to order those 10 into order from best to worst. And as again, just quickly, as much as Kelvin wanted to talk about the John McPhails and the Sean Elliott's and the Dave Watsons of the world, I would say it just makes it effective if the lads have experienced the players in action. But we'll just say, let's say that the Paul Butlers and stuff have been on YouTube. So that's going to have to be good enough today, isn't it, Johnny? But anyway, the 10 that we've selected for us to discuss in alphabetical order are Emerson Thome, Jody Craddock, John Mensah, John O'Shea, Johnny Evans, Luke O'Nien, Michael Turner, Stanislav Varga, Steve Bold, and Yunus Kabul. Very controversial. It did take us a while to get to that 10, and you'll already be screaming at the whatever you're listening, what device you're listening at. It may well go out the window at this point, but we will discuss some that missed out. Do a quick list here. Or actually, this is a longer list than any of the ones we've done previously. We've got Andy Melville, Paul Butler, Darren Williams, Phil Barb, Gary Breen, Steve Caldwell, Nyron Nosworthy, Danny Higginbottom, Anton Ferdinand, Paulo da Silva, Wes Brown, Santiago Virgini, Jason Denea, Jolene Lescott, Lamine Cornet, Papa Gilabodji. Hey, I don't know how he even made the list to miss out, to be honest, but he's I typed it. I think I mistyped that one. Bailey Wright, Jordan Willis, Danny Bart, Callum Doyle, Dan Ballard, and Chris Mepham. So, Andrew, I'm going to start with you because we did have real trouble putting this final 10 together. It was touch and go on a couple for a bit. They were going backwards and forwards slightly. So, who finds themselves unlucky to miss out?
Well, like you say, that list is very long. Johnny makes a really good point about the metrics you use for a defender and not as obvious as a striker. If a striker comes in and scores 15 goals in a season, that's just a black and white issue, whereas it's harder for a central defender. I really liked Andy Melville.
Hello.
Yeah. Paul Butler was a really important signing. I think we discussed him maybe in the goalkeepers one because it was him and Thomas Sorensen that was such a big part of one of our promotions. I really liked Chris Mepham last season. He might not have been in the top 10, but this is a lad who's got international experience. He's played in the Premier League, and he was nowhere near our top 10. It does show how difficult it was to try and narrow this down.
Just quick, because we're talking about, we'll get into kind of favourites and stuff, Andrew, but you mentioned Andy Melville. By the way, he was, that promotion season, the 105-point season, he was, from that season, genuinely, might have been because that's where I played or whatever when I was young, but he was my favourite player from that season. And I remember in the contenders at the end of the year, everyone, there was a little shortlist for Player of the Year. And obviously Phillips was on there, Quinn was on there, Johnson was on there, Clark was on there, but Andy Melville was on there.
Oh,
and to be in the mix with those attacking players in a season where everyone thinks we were gung-ho, he was fantastic starting us off from the back that year.
He was, and he could start you from the back. He wasn't just the kind of defensive player that we were discussing earlier. He was kind of an early cultured centre-back, could you say, because he was decent on the ball. You're right, for him to be kind of listed alongside all those attacking threats really shows how much of a job he did for that team. But Melville, you can switch off now, Johnny, because I'm going to mention Roker Park if you need to get yourself a drink or something. He almost had kind of two...
That would sting, that one, by the way.
Hey, I'm counting these, by the way. We're up to 3.
Oh, okay, sorry. That's the only one. Yeah, he almost had 2 Sunderland careers, because at the Stadium of Light, he was part of this promotion team. But at Roker Park, I remember Melville is one of our few reliable players. We weren't a good team in the mid-90s, but Melville was often one of the ones who stood out and kept things going. I remember back in the day when international call-ups were different and you didn't have an international break, if Melville was away on Welsh duty, we were in bother because he was one of the mainstays of the team. So very, very unlucky not to have been in the top 10.
And just to be sad and nerdy, I always liked his last appearance at Roker Park, where he got someone else sent off, Mike Ford. So he handballed it on the line, and the referee sent Mike Ford off, and Melville didn't say anything. His mate got sent off. Should have been Melville who got sent off.
VAR would have done him.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, to be fair, Roker Park was lucky to have a one-time tease camera, never mind VAR cameras. But yeah, I mean, Kelvin, again, we talked about it. It is tough because you haven't got those stats to kind of back it up like strikers to say they had, they scored. So, I mean, you were looking at penalties and, in terms of how many penalties strikers scored and things like that, it's very difficult to look up how many penalties centre-halves gave away and stuff like that. You have to really dig for those. So, but in terms of that list, who was maybe at the top end of that list? Who was pushing for our top 10?
Totally agree with you lads about Andy Melville. And that lad, he had all the physical characteristics of almost your old-fashioned centre-half, but he could play football. He was good at bringing the ball down and laying the ball off and starting stuff. He was a nice centre-half, him. And again, when he was missing in the 90s, which wasn't in the mid-90s, which wasn't a pleasant time to be watching football at Sunderland. When he was missing, he was noticed by his absence. So I think he might have been number 11,
right?
For me on that list. I tell you, lad, I always enjoyed watching. I'm not sure whether it was for the right reasons I enjoyed watching him, but Nyron Nosworthy always gave a bit of entertainment, didn't he? He was. I'm not saying he was reliable, but when I just remember coming away from games and driving back up home to Scotland, scratching my head and thinking, how on earth does he get away with that on the pitch? But one of the advantages of doing an exercise like this is you start to look at who he was playing with, and that's where I swung more around to my list as we'll see. So I always enjoyed him, and Paul Butler as well. He was we called him the hippo because you couldn't get past his bloody thighs, man. He was bloody massive, wasn't he? But he wasn't the quickest, but he wasn't as slow as what he looked he should have been when he played. He played with some, there was some good partnerships going on there when Butler played. I think he was a bit unlucky not to make the list.
Yeah, there was a couple of things in there, Kelvin, because Nyron Nosworthy, I always remember us siding for him. Like you said, never a dull moment when Nyron was at the back. But I always remember, don't think it was his debut from, if I remember rightly, but it was in the Premier League under Mick McCarthy. And I'm sure it was Middlesbrough away, where he got the ball I think he was playing fullback, he was playing right back, and he tried to turn back and knock it back to Kelvin Davis. And he ended up hitting it out for a corner next to the corner flag. I just remember Kelvin Davis sprinting after it thinking, what the hell is going on here?
And it takes a lot for Kelvin Davis to think you're the idiot in a situation as well.
Well, maybe that was it. Maybe he'd forgotten who was in goal, turned round, thought, hang on, I better not.
The corner's better than this.
Yeah, I just remember, because it was for the Premier League, and I remember thinking at the time, who the hell have we signed here? On a free transfer for Gillingham, going up to the Premier League. But in the end, Roy Keane turned him into a player. And actually, I don't know whether this one's for maybe Andrew, but you as well, Kelvin. The Paul Butler one, I always remember a rumour that Peter Reid had initially gone in for Chris Lucketti at McBury and ended up with Paul Butler. Don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I remember Chris Lucketti, being a decent player, but Reid had form for that because he went in for, we're led to believe, David Connolly and came back with Kevin Phillips. So maybe he just rings up a club and says, I want to buy your centre-back. And they think, oh, well, he must be Paul Butler. We'll send him up for talks.
He did have form for that because Nunes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, getting a different player from the same club's different, the wrong country or something like that, or whatever this was. But yeah, there was that. I mean, obviously it wasn't as big as the famous phone call with Howard Wilkinson when he called Alex Ferguson up trying to sign Dennis Irwin. He ended up selling Eric Cantona on the same call. Not sure he quite expected that, but Johnny, it's interesting because the gents have gone straight to talking about players, primarily. I know some of them played a little bit in the Premier League, but there's some later on who've missed out on the list. Your Wes Browns, your Anton Ferdinands, Lamine Kone, exclusively Premier League for Sunderland.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo a shout for Nyron, by the way, first, because I just loved watching him. like you've all said, totally, absolutely mental, but brilliant sort of entertainment value. But yeah, in terms of the kind of Premier League only players, I think a couple of those could maybe feel hard done to in terms of ability. I think Lamine Kone at his best for us was, he's probably in maybe even the top 5 just on pure talent. But obviously then you start thinking about, for Kone in particular, when he didn't go to Everton for 20 million and then he was terrible the next season, that colours you thinking. Somebody like Wes Brown was brilliant on his day and obviously one of the most naturally gifted footballers in defence that we've probably had pass through the club. You just look at his career, but then he was always injured. He had sort of knee ligaments made out of cheese string that had been left out in the sun today. I just remember that photo after the semi-final at Old Trafford where they're all in the dressing room celebrating and Wes Brown sat on the treatment table with ice packs strapped to his knees. And, he couldn't even move.
Shows how good he was, though.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, the quality and the pedigree was absolutely there. And so on that basis, they definitely feel hard to not to get the list. But
he was not just injured, he was hard done to by referees.
Kevin Friend. Yeah. that was what radicalised me against referees and PDMOL. That was my inciting incident. I just one of those where you watch it and that sort of the little child in you just kind of goes, but that's not fair. He didn't do it. He got the ball. He didn't touch him. Rev, how can you do this? Yeah, that was a disgrace. That I can't believe he gave that, but thank God we got it overturned anyway. But yes, I think some of those names, definitely up there in terms of ability. But yeah, you've got to try and take. It's hard because I've tried to take kind of a bit of everything into account when you're evaluating these players and longevity and ability and achievements and stuff. But it is difficult because how do you weight them? Because there's all these players who've had such unique careers and won loads of silverware at other clubs and come here and. It feels a bit harsh then saying, Wes Brown, Champions League winner, not even in our top 10.
Because I would say on his day, he'd be up there.
Yeah, I mean,
at the top.
On his day, you can make an argument for number 1. for Wes Brown, just in terms of ability. But yeah, so it almost feels a bit disrespectful from us to be like, I mean, you were good in everything, Wes, but you weren't that good. Eunice Cabole's above you, mate. Don't worry about that. But I think it just shows how difficult this is, which we all keep saying because we're all petrified of being slagged off for our list.
Well, that's it. Well, before we get into Virgini's own goal, we'll get into our top tens. And Andrew, could we start with you, please? And could you give us your countdown from 10 up to 6, please?
Definitely, yeah. Number 10, Stanislav Varga. 9, Emerson Tome. 8, Michael Turner. 7, John Mensah. And for 6, for me, was Eunice Cabole.
This is brilliant now. This is the 4th one we've done. And it's brilliant when you do the countdown and you can see the other lads frantically scribbling down and having a look to see how much they line up.
When I was doing that, I was purposefully looking at my notes and not looking at the screen to see those two pulling faces and start laughing at me.
Well, look, I mean, we're starting off with a one who's unanimous because you've got Stanislav Varga bottom of the pile, and I'm probably not giving too much away that he's bottom in everyone's list. And for me, Andrew, there's 2 different Stan Vargas. There's the one we saw on his debut against Arsenal, the one before he got injured, and then the one after. I mean, considering he's even made it to our top 10, that in my mind might have slanted towards the one before injury, but it's a case of what could have been, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, there's a few defenders like this on the list, but with Varga, that is entirely the case. That first performance from him, I think it was so good, that is what's put him in the top 10, because he was affected by injuries. When he came back the second time, he was one of the 6 that Keane brought in on deadline day, I believe. Yeah. And yet he didn't even make the end of the season. I think by the end of it, it was Nosworthy that had replaced him as his first choice centre-back. So even in his second spell, if you'd ignored him from his first time around, he was a high-profile signing for Roy Keane, new manager trying to stamp his authority on the squad. And even Keane, who must have been a big fan of him, even Keane had kind of lost favour with him by the end of that year. So, on his day, absolutely amazing. One of the best individual performances I can remember seeing. But for various reasons, we didn't see that on a consistent basis, sadly.
Yeah, but he did get that bad injury when he was, I think it was, I'm just looking, he played 15 games in that first season after that debut. But I was just looking at Roy Keane's season. He played 21 games. And Kelvin, you were nodding along. And as I said, I'm not giving too much away that he was bottom across the board. But Andrew's touched on that debut for Arsenal. We've both mentioned it. I mean, it goes back to one of the best centre half displays I've seen in a Sunderland strip in a single game. And he had everything. He had bite. He could play. He could bring it out. He could pass 40, 50 yards. He was good in the air. I mean, he just seemed to have everything.
He just gave he gave you. I remember driving home from that game thinking, my God, we've signed the best centre half in the world here, and he's kind of snacked in under the radar. It was a fantastic indication of what he might be able to bring forward, but sadly, for whatever reason, it never got as good as his first game in both spells. And I think injuries obviously impacted. I think he had a bit of competition around him, but he'd I mean, for me, watching him, after that first game, his focus and his concentration used to be, I don't know how you improve that in players, but it was just so obvious to me. He's got all these facets to make him a great centre-half, but he's not bloody concentrating on the game, What is he watching? It made him look really ponderous. And for a big lad, he wasn't that small, sort of slow, but he just used to he used to infuriate the life out of me. You just think, are you watching what's going on? You know, you just, for by that first game, I quite often would be hollering from me seat, will you wake up and watch the game, laddie? You know, so frustrating really, because he looked like he had what we needed, for sure. And obviously managers fancied him, you know, not just one manager. Keane fancied him from his time at Celtic and bringing him back the second time. So there's something there and something to play with. But he almost, if we hadn't made that list of 10, Andy Melville would have definitely trumped him. Like, but
don't get me started, Calvin, because never mind the top 10. Andy Melville would have been in my top 3. Never mind, then none of that. Go on, Andrew.
It's interesting what Kelvin said there about sometimes he looked at him and wondered if he was kind of almost daydreaming or not focused. I remember I used to work at a shop in the Bridges, and when he was first injured, I would often see him just wandering around, just almost in a daze. And I don't know if it was maybe a case of he's landed in this country, doesn't understand the culture, he's then injured. That must be quite difficult for a footballer to, particularly when you've had such a brilliant performance for your debut and everybody's thinking, wow, this lad's going to be an absolute beast. Yeah. You're then injured, and I wonder if he maybe did feel a little bit uncomfortable, not quite himself, and needed more time to adapt, perhaps. Because he then went on and had a good career elsewhere.
Yeah, I think he signed from Bratislava, and if you get an injury and you accidentally wander into the Jackie White's market, you'll think you've landed on an alien planet or something, wouldn't you?
Well, there's the first mention of Jackie White. He had his long hair and he used to walk around. He looked more like he was in some sort of German rock metal band. The closing.
And I remember in the early days as well, he seemed to jump on free kicks.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he used to smash them as hard as he could, basically. Yeah. And if you're in the wall, you weren't sure whether you wanted to actually block it or not.
That's right. Yeah.
He wasn't kind of a deft free kick taker, curling it into the top corner. He just took a run up and absolutely smashed it. I mean, Johnny, just looking at his stats, just quickly, in terms of starts, he played 15 games in his first season, started 11 in his second, and then only a couple in the season we got relegated. He actually played most games in the Roy Keane season than he did in his first, in terms of number of starts in a single season. He played 21 games in that Roy Keane season. I mean, have you got many memories of him in that Roy Keane setup?
I remember being fascinated when we signed him under Keane, because that was my first real I was properly I was going every week. I was paying attention. So we signed Varga, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he used to play for Sunderland before," and that sort of blew my mind. I was like, "Whoa, you can come back? what are you talking about?" So I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And then obviously, all the stories of his debut. Oh, he was absolutely fantastic at Colossus. So you're watching that, and I was getting excited, thinking "Oh wow, we've got this brilliant centre back." And I think he'd been to Celtic, hadn't he? In the meantime, and I was like, "Oh wow, Celtic winning leagues in Scotland and that, wow, that's brilliant." And then he came, and I was just a bit like, "Oh, is that it?" I was just a bit disappointed. I think when I then started watching him play in that second spell under Keane, I'd built him up in my head, I think, to be something that he possibly wasn't. And so he maybe suffers a little bit from. A bit like you were saying as well, you come in and he makes that debut and he's so good that everybody's then all of a sudden the expectations raise and it's, oh, wow, he's got to repeat that now. And for me, I think it was a bit similar in the sense that I was expecting a bit more. So then, he wasn't terrible, was he? He played 21 times in that Roy Keane season for a team that went on to win the championship. So, he's obviously a decent enough player, but I just don't think he never really impressed beyond a certain other centre-back who came into that team in January, who I think we may discuss, later in this particular show. So, yeah, I think just a bit of false expectations and disappointment for me.
course he's decent, Johnny. He's on our top 10, for God's sake.
Yeah,
Anyway.
sorry, of course, with the tough competition to get in this list, you definitely
Bloody
need a player.
Agonised over this, and he's like, "Oh, he wasn't crap." I'm like, "Bloody hell." Anyway, Kelvin, can we have your rundown from 10 up to 6, please?
So I had Stan Varga at number 10, Tom at 9, O'Shea at 8, Mensah at 7, and Luke O'Nien at number 6.
There's some big gasps already, because seriously, the spread on these is ridiculous. You'll see when we get further up that it is crazy. But look, we've got 2 at the bottom, and again, I'm not going to give too much away here. In that the bottom 2 were unanimous. I mean, once we get beyond the bottom 2, I mean, well, it goes a bit nuts. But you did all agree on the bottom 2. Again, another one who's blighted by injury, Calvin, because he came in, and I mean his first season. I'm just having a quick look. Played 35 games in that first season, and you thought, "Well, what a player we've got here." But it just kind of went downhill after that.
Well, it was strange, wasn't it? He's the most English-style Brazilian centre-half that you could wish to meet, wasn't he? He was absolutely no nonsense. I liked him when he came in. I thought he was what we needed. He seemed to enjoy defending. He seemed to enjoy the battle. He liked the physical stuff. He wasn't. I wouldn't have said that his passing was his best asset. But he wasn't. He wasn't the worst centre half I've seen at that. I thought he was a good defender when he came in, but injury
sounded like Alan Hansen there, Calvin, when you said
he was a good defender, and he's dear mate there. But I thought he was. I thought he looked a good, steady, reliable defender when he came in. I liked the look of him. But then injuries.
You like the look of him. Did you model the goatee? You've got a goatee there, Calvin. Did you model that on Emerson?
I just haven't shaved this morning, Chris. Yeah. If you'd seen the height of us, the difference between me and him and height-wise, I definitely. No, I like the look of him well enough, and obviously he's playing alongside some decent lads, and I thought he was. I could see what the plan was there. I could see why he'd gone for somebody like him, but it just didn't. Appearance-wise, his appearances for us after that first season weren't great. Injuries, and then there was something about the. I seem to remember. There was something in the transfer fee, wasn't there, about the number of appearances that he could make. So that wasn't all down to him. I think they did seem to keep him hovering under this. Was it 50? 50 appearances?
50 league games, I think it was.
50 league games, yeah. It looked like he was sort of hovering underneath there, and not getting played when you're wondering why. As an ordinary fan in the stands and not aware of all the intricacies of the deal and stuff like that. He's a good enough. He was a good enough centre half. Yeah.
I mean, and he came in, Andrew, the start of that second season. We'd already finished 7th, and he came in for around the 4-5 million mark from Chelsea, and he doesn't seem to do all right at Chelsea. And I think I was a little surprised we'd managed to get him. But and it's interesting because we did a podcast with him on our previous iteration, the report, and he tells a brilliant story when Ron Atkinson spotted him in the summer playing for Benfica, and basically he was desperate to come to the Premier League, and Ron Atkinson knew it, and he was basically he was trying to. Emerson Thome was saying, I'll come for this much, and basically Ron Atkinson said, well, look, you'll take a £5 and a bag of crisps or something every week, or I'll not sign you. And basically he went, right, okay, and signed on. He says he had no help at all. This Brazilian guy just walking around Sheffield going, bloody hell, what's this dub? But absolutely brilliant story when he was telling it. But I mean, Kelvin's just touched on it, Andrew. We're talking about styles of defenders. he was a stopper, wasn't he?
He was, and his nickname, I think, was the Wall. So that just tells you exactly what type of player he was. I'm interested by that story, Chris, because one of the things I remember about Tome was he was meant to have been a massive influence on helping Julio Walker settle when he came to Wearside.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been through that himself, of it being in a new country, a bit like Varga, perhaps. New country, not really knowing the lay of the land. He's then recognised that in Arca and helped him avoid that scenario. I just wonder about Tome. You mentioned, Chris, about when he came in and he was pretty much a regular when we first bought him. I don't know if we would have even signed him if Varga hadn't have been injured.
Yeah.
I think my timeline, if I've got my timeline right, Varga gets this injury, Tome comes along, the season had already started and perhaps he wasn't a priority when Varga first came.
And someone else we'll come into who we signed at the start of our first season when we finished 7th. A certain elderly gentleman from Arsenal.
It took me a second there, but yes, I know who you mean. So yeah, maybe if things had been different, he would have came here. But he was a solid defender, and I've always got a lot of respect for professionals who kind of take younger players under their wing and try and keep them on the straight and narrow.
Yeah,
Go on, his Brazilian name was Peredo. I'm sure that's what he played with his on his back when because he played in Brazil, didn't he? I'm just wondering what that means. I wish I had my wife here. She's Brazilian. She was born in Brazil. And could maybe have told me what that meant. I will ask her about that. It probably means the gifted one or something like that,
Well, I remember that. I mean, people can go back to listen to that pod, but I remember talking to him about him saying, were you growing up on the beach and everyone else was keeping it up and you were sliding, tackling them as, on the beaches of Brazil and all this. But interesting, Andrew, because you mentioned about that, talking about what the style of a player he was. And again, we'll come on to another player, but you talk about players need a foil. Emerson Tome, in that second season, when he played lots of games, he played 35 games. That was the most he played in a single season. Most of the time, because Jody Craddock played 35 times that season, and Jody Craddock was good on the ball. So you need, all centre-halves needed a foil, just like strikers, don't they?
Well, without doubt. And yeah, as a pair, that works really well in my mind. As you say, they do different jobs. As long as you get the communication right between the two of you, that's exactly what you need in a centre-back pairing.
Yeah, it's a good job Jody Craddock was fluent in Brazilian, isn't it? So, in Portuguese or whatever the sport. But anyway, we need to go to Johnny. Can we have your countdown from 10 up to 6, please?
So 10, Stan Varga. 9, Emerson Tome. 8, Luke O'Nien. 7, Michael Turner. 6, Eunice Kabul.
Oh, some winces going on.
I was wincing right now, actually. I don't know how much I can stand behind this list now.
I was fair on you, Johnny. I kept you out of the Emerson Tome conversation because let's bring you in on Michael Turner, who you had in 7th. And I remember this being a big signing that I thought it kind of summed us up what we were doing at the time. Good young English centre-half, wanted by Liverpool not long before we signed him. I think it was something in the region of around 6 million. He was kind of a reflection of that squad that Steve Bruce were building. I mean, where they were good. But again, I think Michael Turner was a perfect example in that squad and as a squad as a whole where they were good, but everyone thought, can you not be a bit better? We're sure you're a bit better.
Yeah, it felt at the time very much like, okay, we're a Premier League side now, so we make Premier League signings. Obviously we'd come up under Keane and we'd maybe been a little bit scattergun in those first few windows when we came up. I mean, even, the season that we actually went up from the Championship, we just kind of signed everybody. Whereas this did feel like maybe the start of a slightly more considered approach to transfers. Like you say, highly rated, sort of young English player who'd been courted by the likes of Liverpool and stuff. So yeah, the expectations were, I wouldn't say people expect him to come in and be a world beater, but I think everybody expected, like, right, this lad's going to be come in and be good enough from day one. And I do think Turner was pretty solid throughout most of his Sunderland career. I always, I mean, some of it's personal preference, but there'd be some players you'd see on a team sheet and you'd be like, oh God, are you sure he should be playing in this game? Whereas for me, Turner was always just like, oh yeah, Turner's playing. That's fine. Yeah, you were never devastated if he was out, but you were never complaining if he was in, which sounds like damning with faint praise, but I think in the Premier League, to be the kind of player that nobody's ever really complaining when you're playing, and you just kind of, week in, week out, you're performing, you're doing your job. It sounds like it's a bad thing, but I think that's actually extremely underrated, really, as a quality in players. And I think they tend to be the ones who rack up, the most appearances for a lot of clubs. I mean, obviously, Turner didn't exactly stay here for 10 years and turn into a club legend or anything. He was never on that level. But I do rate that quite highly in players. So that's why for me, I think, and look, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are already screaming and crying and throwing things around the room because I've put Michael Turner above Luke O'Nien in a list, which feels a bit sacrilegious. But like I say, just doing it at that level, and under Steve Bruce in particular, when Turner was there, we did have some decent seasons as well. I know obviously it went very sour at the end, but as Bruce likes to remind us, we did finish 10th, don't you know? So Turner was part of a pretty good Sunderland team, and I always, like I say, I just thought he was a steady away kind of player, and somebody who doesn't get any flowers, but certainly doesn't deserve much criticism. And I always remember as well when he backheeled that free kick away at Liverpool, and the referee had told him, "Oh no, you have to take it 20 yards further back." So Turner backheels it, and the ref goes, "Actually, that's fine. You've took it now, so Torres can just go and score in the empty net." So yeah, memorable moment and a decent player. So I'll stick Turner 7.
Yeah, and we had a podcast go out with him, an old one that we recorded, and we put that out. I think it was last week. So if you want to hear him talk about that and discuss that, he was on with us. And I mean, Kelvin, look, because of the spread, unfortunately, on all your decisions, I have to give a couple of spoilers in here because no, you haven't separated them out nicely for us to cut from bottom 5 to top 5. But we talked to Johnny, and he's got him in 7th. Andrew's got him in 8th. And just a quick spoiler, he did squeak into your top 5 by getting into 5th. So you've got him that little bit higher than the other lads. I mean, what did Michael Turner have just to push him that little bit further up?
Johnny's hit on it there for me. I thought he was a very, very reliable centre-half who had a little bit of everything. I thought he read the game well. I thought he wasn't bad pace-wise. Good in the air, not bad on the ground, passing with the ball at his feet. I thought he had a little bit of everything, and I had written in big bold letters, reliable as anything. Was what I put beside him there at a time where perhaps we had there was, I thought we had some good centre halves, but we had almost a history of players getting injured, centre halves getting injured, centre halves not being there. I just felt that he came in and did really, really well, like almost 8 out of 10 every week kind of customer. I liked him.
So based on that, Kelvin, you've just said he was an 8 out of 10, and we said he was linked with Liverpool. Mm-hmm. So what stopped him? What did he lack to play? And no, we think we're the best in the world, of course, but he played for a Sunderland side that reached mid-table. What stopped him from going on to one of those big moves?
So I think he picked up an injury, didn't he? And I thought when he came back from that injury, I didn't think that he was quite the player that he was. He looked a bit almost nervous. He looked like he'd lost something. I didn't know whether he was frightened to really test the injury out. I couldn't quite nail exactly what it was. He just didn't look as vibrant as he did in his very first spell with us. I'm not saying he was rubbish, or I wouldn't have had him at number 5. But
Oh, yeah.
I think the injury affected him a little bit for me.
Yeah.
And then you wonder what's going on. Part of the context to a player. I think some players, it doesn't matter what's going on in the dressing room and with managers and stuff like that. Some players can just get their heads down and do their jobs, and some players are affected by stuff that's going on. So you never know what all of that was about. There was a lot of expectation on him as well. I mean, I was trying to remember how old he was when we signed him. Has anybody got that? Do you know how old he was? What age was he when he signed for us? I
Not
have him
sure.
I have him as a reasonably young.
Oh, he's
guy,
He was exactly the same age as me. So what would have that? What would have that made him? I don't want to say now, but what would have that made him? It would have made him. Oh God, bloody hell! I'm trying to think. So that would have made
it
him.
Looks like he'd be about 25, 26.
Yeah,
then.
something. 26 roughly. Yeah.
So he wasn't a baby. He wasn't a very young guy. No, I just wondered whether there was something going on in the background for him. He just looked he didn't look the player as confident and as steady as what he had been in that first spell after the injury. Maybe it was the injury. I don't know.
I think he lacked a bit of a point of difference as well, didn't he? Really, I mean, you said it before, Kelvin. He was kind of decent at everything. He was all right in the air, all right on the ball, decent reader of the game, but he didn't have any one outstanding quality. Whereas I think the players who step up to the next level tend to be the ones who, even if they've got a little weakness somewhere in the game, if they've got one elite attribute that can make them stand out, they're the ones who tend to rise to the top, don't they?
Yeah. Well, in terms of that injury, he played 32 games in that first season when we finished 13th, and then when we finished 10th in Steve Bruce's highlight of his managerial career, he played 16 games. So he kind of tailed off quite quickly, and I think I remember him saying on the pod that he was absolutely gutted when Steve Bruce left, because I think he was kind of Steve Bruce's player, and I think he felt Martin O'Neill didn't really fancy him. But and actually the quite interesting thing he was talking about as well is Charlton's link up with Inter Milan when he was young, and he ended up having time over in Italy, which was quite interesting to hear about. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, because another quick spoiler. Again, because of the spread, before we get into the top fives. Andrew, Luke O'Nien squeezed in a 5th in yours. And I think the other lads have him roughly about the same. I think Kelvin has him in 6th. Johnny has him down in 8th, a little bit lower. But I kind of expected this range with Luke O'Nien. Once we put him in the top 10, I kind of expected a range, because we all absolutely love Luke O'Nien. He's one of all of our favourites. We're all kind of nodding along to that statement. But it's a real strange one, because he hasn't played in the top flight like some of the others, and he's when you look, we love him since he first joined because of the type of character he is. But it's probably only a couple of years he's really been a centre half, Andrew.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that I like about him most. He came to Sunderland as a midfielder. There was all these accusations of him kind of being a bit busy. I think he was a bit unpopular with some of the players at that time, but he had the right attitude. He got his head down, he's grafted hard, and now he's at a point where you can put him in any position, and he doesn't just do a job, he looks like a natural. I think he's a really good centre-back, and yeah, he's not played in the Premier League yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made a decent stab of it. This whole thing about self-improvement that he has and pushing himself on, I think's brilliant. And we need players like that. That's irrespective of all of his nice guy stuff off the pitch and all the daft things he does that gives us a laugh. I think as a player, he works on his game a lot, and I think he's capable.
Yeah, well, and someone like that can almost drive a club, can't they? As and especially drive change in the club. I mean, Johnny, and again, it's this spread. It's a real kind of confuser, isn't it? With Luke O'Nien, you want to put him top, and then you go, oh, hang on, well, but just because of the fella he is. But you had him down in 8th. There was only Emerson Tolman, Stanislav Varga below him. I mean, was that purely kind of? And I think from memory, he's the only person in our top 10. To have not played in the top flight for Sunderland, I think. So was that basically it?
Yeah, pretty much. Like if I was just letting emotion rule me thinking here, I'd have had O'Nien and Nyron Nosworthy joint number 1 for. I just love them both so much in so many different ways, and O'Nien especially. I mean, he's made over 300 appearances now, hasn't he? Obviously, various different positions. A little like Andrew said, it's easy to get caught up in all the off the pitch kind of stuff of, he's saving dogs from rivers and, he's giving people piggybacks and kisses on the touchline and, at Norwich away and Bristol City and stuff. But you look past all of that and just from a footballing point of view, the way that he's improved and matured through his Sunderland career is genuinely astounding. I don't think any of us would have predicted even a 10th as much of this, what we've ended up squeezing out of O'Nien as a footballer over the past, whatever it is, 7-8 years now. But it's just, individual qualities kind of ruled my list more than anything. And just because he hasn't proven himself at that top level, I couldn't put him any higher than 8th. I think from literally every other metric that you can possibly judge a footballer by, he makes me top 3. But it's just the fact that he hasn't done it against the best of the best, and he, unfortunately might not get much of a chance to do so. So if we did this list in next summer, O'Nien might be in my top 3 if we've stayed up and he's played 30 odd games. But just as we stand right now, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, Kelvin, just quickly on the number of games, if you look at the number of starts he's played in seasons since he's joined the club, over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 managers, something like that.
Yeah,
maybe more. You talk of the start. He started going back to the beginning, 37 games, then 42 games, then 41 games, then 31, then 38, then 44, then 48 games. And look, I mean, talking about longevity, I mean, he's already ticked that box. But I'm genuinely, we do this on This Week, Calvin, and I'm genuinely envious when you talk about the characters that you have seen in the past and that you talk and you've seen in the flesh play for Sunderland. Where does Luke O'Nien rank?
Oh, he'll be, we'll certainly look back on his time with the club, and he will be up there, I'm pretty sure, for the vast majority of people. I always laugh when every week when I go and watch him play, somebody else shout out or somebody else say, he'll never make a centre-half, that lad. And week after week after week, he just comes in and proves them all wrong, So, in my mind, I've never thought of him as a centre-half. I always think of him, and it's quite an old-fashioned term, this, but as a sweeper. And he plays behind the big lad in front of him, but I know that he doesn't. I know that they tend to go right and left hand side. But to me, he looks like a sweeper when he plays in the centre of defence. He's for me, fantastic player, fantastic club servant. He's almost like something back in the 60s where, if we'd been doing top 10 centre halves from 60s, 70s, we wouldn't have had the dilemma that we've had. We go through so many players now. It's absolutely, when you look at the list of players that play for clubs now, and then you go back to, say, the 60s and 70s, I would say that there's not half as many players to select from, and you get a chance to get to know them. But O'Nien's, that's why I'm trying to say that O'Nien's a bit of a throwback, isn't he? He's been with us a long time. He's got longevity. You don't get to play all those games without being a bit good. It's aspects of the game. He's just a throwback, and I love him to bits. He's great. Good for the club. He's good with the fans. If they're going to play him, I want him to get games in the Prem. I want him to play in the Premiership so that we can knock on the head this idea that he cannot do it there. But at the moment, I've got one slight worry about him. That's VAR in the Prem and him playing. Because he's such a shithouser when he's playing back there, isn't he? He's always up to something, And when they said they were going to have VAR at the playoff final, I mean, he nearly threw Kiefer Moore into the North Stand when we played against them earlier in the season. I'm travelling down to Wembley thinking, oh my God, look, God, screw the nut bunny lad, please, for God's sake, and terrible though it was very good of him to dislocate his shoulder so that VAR didn't catch him out doing stuff, But no, he'd be right up there, Chris, as one of the characters, one of the. I hesitate to use the word legend, but he might be right in that mix of players that if you saw him play, he'd be one of your favourite players.
You're talking about the VAR, Kelvin, and I appreciate what you're saying. This might end up being famous last words when he gets sent off against Japan. I actually think he's quite a clever player, and I think he will adapt his game. A lot of the things he does, people say, oh, he's an idiot. A lot of these things he does where he's like jumping on people's backs and giving them kisses, I think there's a bit of reasoning to it. He's almost deliberately trying to get a reaction out of players. I don't know if that's me just being kind to him or not, Calvin.
No, I'd take your point. When we scored that last minute goal against Leeds to go,
yeah.
What was his intellectual thinking there, Andrew? Was he?
Well, I don't know if he was thinking. I mean, he was.
Anyway, moving swiftly on. Anyway, Luke Onan's a legend. With
Chris, can I just make one last point on him, please? A sensible point. Don't worry, it's a sensible point. I think he was integral to the way we played last season. Without him bringing the ball out or pinging it into the corners, I don't think we're nearly as good as we were.
It's sometimes when we were slow, he ended up whipping it into somebody's feet to speed it up, and almost he woke the team up sometimes by doing it. But I agree with you all. I think he's going to end up almost in the same bracket as a Kevin Ball. I think, but by the time he's finished, I think we're going to look at it like that. But look, let's get into our top fives. Let's get into the interesting bit, because Johnny, can we have your countdown from 5 up to your number 1, please?
Yeah, and now we're in, we can finally get to the good bit.
Oh yes. This is why I started with you, mate. Don't worry about that.
So, 5, Geordie Craddock. 4, Steve Bold. 3, John O'Shea. 2, Johnny Evans. My number 1 is John Mensah. I can see some raised eyebrows. When you're getting raised eyebrows from the guy who had Lee Johnson as high as he did.
Oh, hey. Oh, I tell you what, he had that ready, didn't he, Andrew?
Honestly, I was impressed because I think it's brave. And I actually,
it's definitely brave.
No. I was impressed because I think I'll let Johnny come in a minute, but I can appreciate that on certain performances, you could make an argument for John Mensah being absolutely unbelievable.
Don't make it easy for him because, Johnny, look, John Mensah, your top spot, the 2 other lads have him in 8th, as you might have heard, Johnny. So the floor is yours to present your argument.
I just think John Mensah is... I know we were talking about Wes Brown and that before, about natural ability and being just gifted. Mensah was unbelievable on his day. I mean, like, seriously.
Clever bloke, wasn't he?
Yeah, nobody could get past it. His reading of the... Oh, here we go. You're just trying to rob Mason, aren't you? That's what you're doing.
He was an intelligent defender, wasn't he?
Yeah, his IQ was above 140. but appropriate because he was a bloody clever defender. He was. His reading of the game was spectacular, I thought. You know, he just knew where to be, what to do at all times. It felt a little bit like what I imagine, not to the same level, but what I imagine it feels like for Liverpool fans when they watch Virgil van Dijk, and then you kind of go, I don't care who's next to him, because he's good enough that he'll just get them through it. And I always felt with Mensah, I just didn't even need to look at who was next to him, because you just knew that Mensah was going to be, if the ball was in a dangerous position in the box, Mensah would be there first. If a ball needed winning, he'd be there first. He was a decent enough player on the ball as well. You know, he wasn't just like a bruiser or a pure stopper. I think he had a bit more about him. Obviously, really unlucky with injuries. You know, I think that's probably the story of his career, I imagine, in a sense, is massive amounts of ability and talent, and obviously hamstrung hugely by injuries, which it's a real shame, because I would have loved to watch him more. You know, I think he only made something like 34 league appearances for us in the end. So you can certainly have some comments about how I can put somebody who never played a full season's worth of games number one in the list. But I just, you know, I think that's such a shame, because I'd have loved to watch him for 70, 80, 100 plus games for Sunderland, because I think he was absolutely fantastic on his day. And yeah, like I say, brilliant on his day, total levels of ability. But as well, I think he had a certain style about him. You know, he just was very graceful and elegant, I thought, as well, watching him defend. Sometimes you watch some players and they almost feel a bit like they're succeeding in spite of themselves. You know, they may be all limbs going everywhere, or, you know, just certain things about them. They don't look fully in control all the time. Whereas I thought Mensah, he looked like every single movement of his body was calculated and precise. And yeah, I just loved watching him. Fantastic player.
Yeah. And, Kelvin, I mean, look, Johnny's touched on it, he only played 30, I think it was 35 games in total. So I think he started 15 in the first season and started 15 in the second season, something like that. So, I mean, not very many appearances. You had him quite low down. I mean, was it purely the appearanrid that
just
brought
the
down?
end. Just wanted to see more of this lad, though. He was cracking. I always remember he played a few games with Michael Turner, didn't he? And I always think, you know, if you made comparisons between Seb Coe and Steve Ovett, Turner was over, and Mensah was like Seb Coe. He just glided across the ground. He hardly looked like he was moving sometimes. I thought he was a fantastic athlete, and good with the ball. I really liked him, and was ever so sad looking. You realise these things when you look back, don't you? You think, oh God, I wish we'd seen more of him playing for us, because what a player he was in his position. He's a kind of lad. He looked like he could have played in midfield. He was that kind of player. He used to remind me of Colin Todd. That's how good he was. He reminded me of Colin Todd playing at the back there.
Wow. I mean, that's praise for you, isn't it? And Andrew, I mean, look, he ended up having 86 caps for Ghana as well. And, you know, you look at these stats, and actually he didn't play. He only played a handful of games when he left Sunderland after his couple of years. But it was a strange one. And you know, Kelvin's talked about him playing in different positions. I remember him also, I'm sure he filled in at fullback a couple of times, either during games or when he started.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I'm almost certain that he did, Chris. I can't understand why Johnny rates him so highly. He was just an absolute beast. He was a fantastic defender. You mentioned it earlier, Chris. I can't remember. It might have been about Varga, but that phrase of like what might have been. Yeah. I think that's Mensah all over, because he was that good. I don't think we would have had a sniff of seeing him play for us at all if he was more robust. I think that was the only reason we got him, because when he did get out on the pitch, he was brilliant. really good player, and in another world he would have been higher up the list.
Yeah.
There was a bit of Jan Kirchhoff syndrome about him, I think, wasn't there? Where a bit like you just said, Andrew, if he could stay fit, Kirchhoff would have still been at Bayern Munich instead of coming to Sunderland. If Mensah could stay fit, he'd have been at a club up in that level of the game and not knocking about in mid-table for us with Michael Turner.
Definitely.
The frustrating thing about it, Johnny, in terms of injuries, it wasn't one injury that did him.
Yeah, yeah.
He just kept picking them up.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes with players, they become injury prone because they've got a repeated injury. I mean, Fraser Campbell was a little bit of both because he did both of his cruciate ligaments, didn't he? But I think he did one of them twice, I believe, in his career. And when you do a cruciate ligament or something like that more than once, that's a sign of weakness in terms of the physicality. But yeah, Mensah was just unlucky. It was just like constant like niggles and strains, and it just felt like he couldn't get a string of run of games together without something going wrong. And when you can't keep the fact he was that good without just playing unbroken strings of games is just another thing that I think speaks to how good he was. Yeah. The fact that he could just dip in and out and still perform to that level and still defend that well and fit into the back four. And I mean, Kelvin, you said he kind of glided through games, I think, or Andrew, somebody said it anyway. And he did. He looked like he shouldn't have even broken a sweat by the time he got off the pitch. Almost like he didn't need a shower afterwards. He could have just changed back into his normal clothes and nipped back home. Which just to look that effortless in the Premier League, I think is extremely difficult.
Yeah, well, you did very well to drag him up our leaderboard, Johnny, to get his average up. But
he's gone from 8 to 7.5 now because I'm becoming number one.
Pretty much, you dragged him up to the table there. Kelvin, let's get into your top 5. Can we have your countdown, please?
So I had Turner at 5, Kabul at 4, Evans at 3, Jody Craddock at 2, and Steve Bould at number 1.
Yeah, well, let's start with Yunus Kabul because you have him in 4th, which is his highest position. The other lads have him, I think, in 6th from memory. You all roughly have them in mid-table there or thereabouts. He wasn't here for long. I think he only played 24 games for Sunderland. But he's kind of he's got that moment against Newcastle. We talked about strikers having moments, keepers having moments. He's got a really big moment in terms of a centre half because centre halves don't often have those. Talk about Varga with a game, but he's got one big moment. So what he's just kind of slots in behind your top 3. So what's elevated him up there?
Yeah. Well, he played with some good players, I think, and didn't he? Him and Cornier had a marvellous sort of run together, and that's where you were talking about partnerships. But I always think that he brought that to the table for Cornier, and it was Cornier that benefited from playing alongside him. I wouldn't die on the Kabul hill of saying that he has to be in the top 5. I think he was worthy of a top 10 place, and just the number of games I saw him play, I thought this lad was a good centre half. I thought he had an ability to play alongside the likes of Cornier. I think you could have slotted anybody in beside him, and he would have probably bought the best out of them. I always thought that forwards didn't like playing against him, and I don't know where that comes from. It was just what it looked like to me. You could see lads trotting out and looking across and seeing Cornier and thinking, "Oh no, not him," because for a big lad, he was quick across the ground. He was good in the air. He was canny on the ball. I thought he was one of these guys when he went out, he's totally focused on the game as well. You were never shouting at him saying, "What the hell are you playing at? What are you looking at there?" He seemed to always be in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. And that's why I liked him as a centre half. But I wouldn't die on the hill of he's got to be in he's got to be in the top 5. It was just where he landed with me. Not that many appearances at the end of the day. And then the way that he left us, he wanted to go back down south. There was a reason for him, wasn't there, to go back down south. And you know, I think when a player leaves, are you sad that he's gone, or are you, oh well, we'll get somebody just as good as him? When I heard that he was going, I was sad that he'd gone. I thought we could have done with another season or two out of him before he did leave us. So I liked him. I liked him well enough.
Yeah,
Great last. I always remember him in that last game. I don't know if you remember this. I mean, you'll obviously remember the game. We beat Everton 3-0.
Yeah.
Sam Allardyce is running round the pitch, claiming all the glory, you know. And if you looked across at where Kabul was, he was in tears. He was in tears at that game, you know. Now, I just that kind of feeling for the club and feeling for the what an effort it had been, you know. And I just thought, you know, good on you, lad. You know, we'll have another season or two out of you. That'll do me fine. So I liked him. I liked him.
Typical footballer, tears and kissing the badge, and then he buggered off a couple of weeks later. Brilliant. But I mean, Andrew, I always thought, you know, you could tell why he'd played for the likes of Spurs, and you could tell why he'd been in the Premier League for all that time. And look, he got brought in under Dick Advocaat, and then I think actually it seemed obviously Sam Allardyce eventually after Christmas when he brought those players in got us a bit of stability, and then that kind of Kabul, he gave Kabul a bit of freedom after that to play.
Yeah, I mean, in that period when things were going on right under Allardyce, Kabul was immense. I mean, he was rapid. Touching on something Kelvin said, I think he was a big part in Kone playing so well at that point. I thought they were tremendous. I think him leaving was massive for David Moyes. I mean, Moyes had all sorts of issues and reasons why we failed, but I think losing Kabul was one of them. The funny thing about Kabul, I don't know if any of you remember this, lads, he'd been linked with us before, and I'm sure his agent said something really over the top. Something like, I wouldn't play for Sunderland.
Even if there was an earthquake or something.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly it, Johnny. I remember for a long time not being too impressed with Kabul and thinking when he turned up, are we suddenly now good enough for you? But maybe that was something his agent had said. Don't know if it was lost in translation. Because when he did come, he was only there with us for a season. It was short but sweet though. He was cracking for us.
Yeah, that's it. And we'll stick with you, Andrew, because now we're going to complete all of the top fives. If you can do your 5 up to your top central defender, please.
Yes, although I must say a name that's just popped in my head. This might scupper everything. Matt Kilgallen, lads. We haven't mentioned him yet. Surely his
Matt Skillgallen. Thank you.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I think I want to change my number one now, Chris, because some of those turns he did at Man City were unreal.
I was watching the highlights the club put on YouTube of that game the other day as well. Just Kilgallen's in my head as well. I'm so glad you brought him up.
There you go.
All right, lads, we forgot about Brendan Galloway as well. Come on, let's crack on.
I think I've changed my number one again now. Dear me. Right. Sorry. I know we've gone off track there. Yeah. Number 5 for me was Luke O'Nien. Number 4, Jody Craddock. Number 3 was Johnny Evans. Number 2 was Steve Bold. And I had John O'Shea at number 1. And look at Chris there. He's not, he's unsure.
Look, we've heard all 3 lists now. Each had a different top pick. 5 players appeared in the top 3 picks across the board. Only 1 player appeared in the top 2 across the board more than once. So the whole thing's definitely not unanimous. Everyone's got different views. You've got John O'Shea in top spot. So just as I did with Johnny, because, Kelvin had him down in 8th. Johnny had him in his top 3. But the floor's open why John O'Shea is your number 1 top central defender since we moved to the Stadium of Light.
Well, I'll go with my trump card first of all. I'm pretty sure that he's had more Premier League appearances for us than any other player, which I think says a lot about O'Shea, because he was at the club when we had all sorts happening. We had a new manager every couple of months. We had new players coming and going all the time. A lot of these players, I'm sorry, but they just didn't give a toss. I know for a fact some of them didn't. You know, they after a defeat, they would come sauntering out of the changing rooms, not give a nick. John O'Shea was a proper professional. Defeat hurt him a lot. The club mattered a lot to him. I think we needed a leader like him around the place at the time, because, like I say, was just so much happening. He was one of the few people keeping it together at some points. Good defender as well. I can remember one or two moments. I remember one game he had Diego Costa in his back pocket. He was a quality defender. His record at Man United speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of bad things going wrong with Sunderland at the time, and John O'Shea, for me, was one of the players who kind of fought against that. In all of those relegation battles, he was invariably the one who was trying to pull the club out of bother.
Well, he was about 30 when he joined us, and looking at the games he played, I think it was something like, you know, in terms of seasons and starts, 34 games, 36 games, 43 games, 26, 27, then 37, and he played something like 256 games in total, Andrew. And you're saying he was the constant, and you're saying that. So it was because, look, we can't deny the fact that things went downhill pretty much from the time he signed, and I'm not saying that was down to John O'Shea, but would you say, I mean, was it everything that was going around him, and he was one of the highlights, and you think that, you know, he was one of the ones that stood out in, you know, the rest of them were just kind of not performing, and then he was trying to pull it out the bag?
Yeah, and maybe people will point to the fact that he was around for all of these issues and say, well, surely he's the common factor in all of this. So, you know, it's how you read these situations. I mean, John O'Shea was at Man United for all of those years. You know, Alex Ferguson in charge. It was a well-run ship. He must have then come to Sunderland and just looked around him and thought, what is going on? This is not how you run a football club. But I just think he got his head down. He worked hard. I don't think he ever played poorly. I mean, he had his limitations. Don't get me wrong, but in a team where you didn't know what they were going to do from one game to the next, he was invariably the only one who you could be comfortable with and say, he'll be a 7 out of 10. He'll do his job. You'll not get any dramas with him. So, yeah, I just think his role in the club was pretty important at the time.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to John O'Shea Kelvin, do you think he wished he'd just stayed at Man United and sat on the bench for half the season and played the other off?
I'm sure there maybe were days where he did wish that, but I totally agree with Andrew. He was very he always presented himself on the pitch and off it as very, very professional. I think I'd absolutely have him in the top 10 for sure. The number of games he played, the way that he played those games, the number of personnel that he played with over that time. You know, I think he was a leader in troubled times, for sure. I thought his pace towards the end of his time with us, I thought he was caught out a little bit pace-wise towards the end of his time with us. But I mean, the lad was, he was, you know, he'd a good right to be. He'd played a number of seasons and was the old knees were beginning to creak a bit. But total respect for him. Very, very steady individual to have in your team.
We're talking about the spread, Calvin. You know, Andrew's number one defender. You've got him down in 8th, which is obviously the complete opposite end of the top 10. I mean, so what made you say, actually, no, John O'Shea's towards the bottom, and was it I mean, because he joined at that stage in his career where you're saying he was creaking and he did lose his pace, although he was never the quickest defender, I don't think. But you're right, he did get kind of caught out. So what dragged him down the list for you?
I think he was. It's hard, this, isn't it? Because he is actually in the top 10. We've got him in the top 10
ahead
there.
Of Matt Kilgallen,
ahead of Matt Kilgallen and Titus Bramble and players like that. So as I say, I definitely have him in me top 10. I think his pace. I felt at times there were, and I wish I could remember the games. I'm going to say this, and you're going to say, what are you talking about? I seem to remember a couple of times towards the end of his time, there was like calamities going on. And I'm not saying he was responsible for it, but I just thought his leadership, his management of that back line just starting to slip a little bit. Now, that might be about the quality of players.
I think in terms of just purely as a defender, there is a fair argument to say Kelvin's ranking and Johnny's ranking of him being a little bit lower down is fair. I just think in terms of games, he must have probably played double the amount of the next player on this list. So that was what set them apart from me. I fully appreciate what Kelvin's saying and maybe towards the end when he's playing in the championship for us and he's surrounded by players who aren't as high a caliber, perhaps he did wane a bit. But in terms of overall service for Sunderland, not necessarily who's the best defender, just who's served Sunderland the best and for a prolonged period, that was what kind of nudged John O'Shea higher up for me.
Oh, well, if I knew it was just a criteria of hanging around for as long as possible, I would have changed it.
Right. You've been really good today, Chris. You've not been stirring the pot, and now suddenly you've thought, I'll just give him a little dig.
I've bitten my tongue for too long, Andrew. Anyway, Johnny, I want to talk about Johnny Evans. You had him in second behind John Mensah. And it's look, we're talking about centre-halves, we're talking about them with partners, and it's never a one-man show. But God, he was huge in, when you think about it, we ended up having 10 years in the Premier League, and he was huge in terms of not only getting us up, but then coming back and keeping us up in that first season. And he was absolutely massive. He was one of the big things that changed the course of the promotion season. And actually, if you look at the staying up the next season, we were really close to that kind of bottom three when he came in that January, and he lifted us up a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you've sort of singled him out here for a bit of discussion, because I was going to say we have to talk about Johnny Evans. He was absolutely brilliant, wasn't he, when he came in? And I think almost in a weird way, like the exact opposite of John O'Shea, where with O'Shea we're saying he's made hundreds of appearances and he was captain for a long time, and so you've got to rate him based on that. I think with Johnny Evans, you actually look at it the other way and you think, to say that, because he came in the January window 2 seasons in a row, didn't he? For a young lad who was 18, 19, to come in January 2 seasons in a row, and everybody almost, looks back and goes, if you're pointing at like single reasons why we went up and then stayed up, you could do a lot worse than pointing at Johnny Evans those 2 seasons and say he's maybe more than any individual player, he's the guy that made the difference. To have done that at such a young age, coming into Sunderland with, as we all know, massive pressure when you come in at Sunderland, especially, 06, 07, the pressure was on to get promoted again. And then the next season, again, the pressure's on to then try and stay up. That is not an easy environment in which to come in and start effectively learning your trade in English football, because I think he'd been on loan maybe somewhere in Belgium or somewhere like that with one of Man United's feeder clubs beforehand. But Sunderland really was his sort of baptism in the top level game, certainly in this country. To have come in those circumstances, and as much as I love him, I think he mainly played alongside Nyron, didn't he, in the middle of defence. Nobody's looking at that team and saying, why, Nyron Nosworthy was the difference. Everybody's saying Johnny Evans. He was that good. He was head and shoulders above the rest of them in that defence in terms of quality. And yeah, to have made such a massive impact that we still talk about him in these terms, getting on for 10 years later, and to have only played 2 half seasons just shows you everything about the levels that he was performing at and the impact he had on the team and on the fan base. It's just phenomenal. And I think it's no surprise to any of us who watched him that he went on to have the career that he did, and win Premier Leagues and stuff, because, it was all there from the age of 18. We could all see it.
Kelvin, just in terms of Johnny Evans, you talk about the fact he played for 35 games, and I think Martin said this on a previous, I think it might have been when we were talking about the goals, or I can't remember what we were talking about, but Martin was talking about the impact of a player and that kind of, dragging them up when you're talking about things like this. But he had a part to play in 10 years consecutive seasons in the Premier League for Sunderland. He had a massive impact on a whole club like that, even in 35 games.
Do you know what? He's one of them players, and one of them young players. Remember how young he was when he came in. I'll be telling people I saw this lad play when he was just a young lad, and what a cracking centre half he was for me. I'm just ever so glad that I saw him play. When he came in the first time, he hadn't made his debut for Man United. He made his debut for Man United probably off the back of, his time with us gave him something. He was playing, he was key to that promotion for me, and playing. He just hit the ground running and came straight into the team as well. When he came in, hit the ground running. Fantastic young player. Everything he had it all, didn't he? And just one of them lads. I was pleased I got the chance to see play, even if it was for two half seasons.
Just as a side issue to Johnny Evans, must be one of the few Sunderland players who's also had a brother do well for us. Johnny Evans was really important in establishing us back in the Premier League. Corey Evans had a part to play in us getting out of League One, because for a long time that didn't look like it was happening. Got nothing to do with central defenders, but I just thought I'd throw Corey Evans in.
That's interesting, because I'm trying to go back. There was obviously the Gabardini brothers, and then before that there was the Hughes brothers.
Oh yes, yeah.
But off the top of my head, I've only got those three.
Well, with those two pairs of brothers, you had one who played for us loads and one who were kind of, I don't want to sound harsh, but it didn't work for them.
Well, I think they're both brothers in the other sense, in Gabardini and Hughes. I'm pretty sure the other brother only played one game in both cases, I think.
Yes. Yeah, Hughes' debut, he went off injured, I believe. Yeah. Ricardo only came on for the one match.
And he came on, didn't he not replace Marco?
He did, yes. He did, yes. Yeah. So the two Evans were at Sunderland a lot further apart than the Hughes and the Gabardini boys. But, just something I always think about. And I wonder if Johnny Evans sent to Corey Evans. It's a decent club. If things work out for you there, the fans will appreciate it and back you. Because I think Johnny Evans enjoyed playing for Sunderland, and had we had him on loan from another club, he might have fancied returning. I think his lass is from up here as well. So had it not been Man United, he might have become a permanent player here. We would have loved him, but at that point you're not gonna give up the chance of winning all those trophies with Man United. So it wasn't yet another one. It wasn't to be, sadly.
Yeah. Well, look, there's two more players to talk about. And Kelvin, I want to start with you, because you've got Steve Bould in top spot, and that's where I'd have him as well. I remember seeing when Steve Bould signed for Sunderland from Arsenal. I remember there was murmurings because we'd brought Thomas Helmer in, I think a week later, if memory serves me right, and we brought these two, let's say, experienced defenders in. I think it was like 35 and 36, I think. People were talking about their kind of age in total and all this sort of stuff. But I'll tell you what, when he signed, and it's scary to think how good it must have been for Arsenal fans to watch him at his peak. Because when he signed for us, I don't think I've ever seen a player in a red and white strip, as I've been watching in the flesh, who could read a game like Steve Bold?
Yeah, I might have been one of the people that was talking about him before I saw him play. But from game number one, every game he played for us, this boy was on it, and boy, what a Rolls Royce of a centre half he was. He's reading of the game. I mean, he was a good age. He was troubled with bad arthritis, Steve Bold. Even when he came to us, I'm sure that was an issue for him. But he's reading of the game immense. He's used to the ball. He's towering in the air. Even then, his ability in the air, he just seemed to tower above whoever he was marking. Cracking leader on the pitch as well. You knew who the boss was when he was on the pitch. I just loved watching this lad play, and it was a weird thing because obviously I'd seen him play for Arsenal a bit, and he was kind of he sort of, for me, went under the radar as a Sunderland fan watching Arsenal. He kind of went under the radar a little bit because there was that many other great players. I always loved Patrick Vieira, and I thought he was he always caught my Thierry Henry. You're watching them boys, not realizing probably that the likes of Bold at the back has given them the platform to play. What a player this lad was. Despite the low level of appearances for me, right from the off, I was struggling to think of he's either number one or number two, in that list, despite these was it 24 appearances in total?
Yeah.
For us, well, he was just great to watch. He was everything you wanted out of your centre-half. It's interesting, we've just been talking about Johnny Evans. I think of them too. Johnny Evans was the young pretender, and Bold was like he was the prince. He was the prince. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Andrew, your memories of Steve Bold, because it's funny, because again, I mean, we're talking about moments, but it's funny. It's one of the few centre halves where I've got lodged in my head almost like a memory of him watching him. And I remember I can't remember who it was against. He was playing against this big striker, really good in the air, like tough striker, elbows all over the place. And every time he was reading the ball, and he was almost did to strikers what Niall Quinn did to defenders, where the ball would come up to a big man and he'd give them a little nudge, so the ball would just go over there and he'd take it on his chest and just give the ball to someone. And it's funny because for centre-halves, you've got images of strikers in your head doing fantastic things. He's one of the very, very few centre-halves I've got in my head of doing just things where I thought, that's just brilliant.
Well, he was just sheer class. Just that's all I can say. He was fantastic, and very clever with the way he did things. He didn't need to be particularly fast. He didn't need to be particularly big. He was a little bit older when he got to us, and yet he's outthinking these defenders, and he's got the art of defending down to a T there, like you say, with the well-timed nudge just to put somebody off balance. I thought he was amazing. Kelvin said something earlier about how Steve Bold perhaps didn't stand out because he was part of an Arsenal team that was so good. I was amazed to see that Steve Bold only got, I think it was 2 England caps.
Yeah.
I mean, crikey, he was fantastic.
I'm fairly certain wasn't one of those in the Umbro Cup or something.
Something
like that.
Very possibly, because I think they were mid-90s when he played. He had a lot of domestic honours, but I think he was good enough to play internationally more often. And like a lot of these players, like Johnny Evans, their role was crucial because when they came to Sunderland, we were trying to establish ourselves in a new division. Steve Bold brought the know-how and the Premier League nous to a newly promoted team and helped them acclimatise. That's happened so often in Sunderland history, and that's what makes some of these players stand out for me when they play brilliantly, but they help the club take a step forward in terms of the level they're trying to compete at.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. We do a Steve Bold this summer, maybe, but
Yes.
moving on. Our last one, Johnny, I'll start with you. You might be a bit hazy on here. Oh, and by the way, if you want a clip of Steve Bold, if you just watch Full Monty, you can see how Steve Bold defended in a part of the Full Monty. But Johnny, last one is Jody Craddock. You had him down in 5th, and obviously, he did sign just as we kind of started up at the stadium alike, but obviously, you've looked back on him, and he was a big part of that promotion season. And then kind of it's bizarre because he went out the side in that 105-point season, but then he fought his way back in when we're in the Premier League.
Yeah, and it's that I was going to say bounce back ability, and then I just felt too disgustingly like actual match of the day top 10 type stuff. I know we've already had Alan Hansen on the pod with us today, but if we could just not turn into them entirely. But yeah, that resilience to sort of come back from not being involved so much in the 105-point season to then, I mean, I think he was making sort of 20 and 30 appearances a season in the Premier League, wasn't he? Over the next few seasons. That speaks volumes to him as a character as well. And you don't stick around Sunderland long enough to rack up, I mean, what is it in the end? 150 plus league appearances? So
168.
There you go. So you're probably touching 200 near enough if you include cups and stuff as well. You don't hang around Sunderland long enough to make that many appearances if you're not a strong character and you've got a real self-belief and almost a bit of arrogance really to be able to keep your head up and keep your chin up in the tough times. And I think that's Craddock's the kind of player I think who captures Sunderland fans' imaginations because of having a bit of grit and having a bit of character about them and a bit of personality. I mean, he turned into an artist after he's retired from his football career, so that gets him a couple of points in my eyes anyway, before anything else footballing. But yeah, like he had a lot about him, and obviously a brilliant defender as well. You're not making 50 plus appearances for Sunderland in the Premier League if you're not able to play. Hence why he's in our lists. And he did well at Wolves as well, so he's obviously had he's had a good overall career as well, which again just speaks to the level of quality that he had. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to go in depth on sort of his partnerships with his centre backs at Sunderland and exact style of play because I wasn't watching him week in week out at the age of 2. It might shock you, but yeah, I think with a legacy like his, you can't not have him in your top 5.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about him bouncing back, I mean that promotion season because he played Kelvin, he played in our playoff season, and he came in when Melville and Ord got injured, and he came in, played loads of games on the way to Wembley, and then disappeared in that promotion season. Only played 6 games. But then over the next 3 seasons in the Premier League, played 18 games, then 35, then 30 games. And I used to sit with a fella in the stadium, an older fella at the time, and he always used to compare, and I don't know if this is right, but he always used to swear by it. He used to compare Jody Craddock to Sean Elliott.
Yeah. And that would be exactly the comparison I would make. He was similar-ish build, and the attributes were the same. I always felt with Jody Craddock, he was never beat. He just played the game in the right way. He got stuck in from the off. He was quick. He was good with the ball at his feet. He wasn't too. If I had a slight criticism of him in the air, when he wasn't bad in the air, but I felt a bit a Steve Bold type centre forward. Give him a little nudge, and you could knock him off. You could knock him off his header, but I just
he was
really
quick,
like this lad. His recovery.
Yeah.
Even when he did get beat, he would be up and back, and the amount of times you would see him, you'd possibly see a forward go by him, and then he's back and caught him. His recovery was immense. And he played through some great seasons for us. I'll give you his bounce back ability for sure, but he played a lot of games for us through some good seasons for us. That was an exciting team that came together, and he played with some good, boys that we've just been speaking about, Bold, Tome, Varga. He played with them lads, So I think he was a really, really good centre half for us, and would always, if we were talking about Stadium of Light era, he makes my top 5 every time.
Yeah, that's it. He was tucked in behind Steve Bould in second for you, Calvin. And Andrew, I mean, just when he came to the club, it seemed it was one of these odd ones by Peter Reid. It was that kind of first summer at the Stadium of Light, and we'd kind of made the big sign, and we broke our transfer record with Lee Clark. And suddenly we buy this kid from Cambridge, and everyone's like, oh, well, he's maybe one for the future or whatever, because we've got Dickie Ord, we've got Melville. And then we've got Nightmare at Elm Park. And not long after, we end up with a pairing of Darren Williams and Jody Craddock. And these two young'uns just kind of take us back up the table. And then we just miss out on automatics. But he just kind of came storming in from nowhere.
Yeah, and he fit into the team really quickly. Like you say, having played lower down the leagues. I think it's quite apt that he's in the top 10, because I think it was the actual day the stadium opened that he signed, if I remember rightly. So
did a podcast with him, and actually he got driven there for the Ajax game.
Yes, yeah. And he did. He came in quickly, and then it was clear that he was more than good enough for that division, and looked at ease in the Premier League as well. I think it was 2001-02 that he was actually player of the season. That might have been one of the seasons when the things had gone wrong, perhaps, and we'll start to slide down the table. But he was performing a lot better than some more glamorous names, shall we say. I thought he was very good. He could be physical, but he wasn't a clogger. He was fast. Very good defender. Very good.
Peter Reid convinced him to come because he promised him a blank canvas.
Well, it's good, but I'm gonna piggyback on that. Actually, I was very fortunate. I was invited to his first exhibition, which was at the Winter Gardens, and I had a bit of a chat with him. Lovely fella. I'll tell you who was there as well, Chris. Neil Wainwright. There was a pod you did with him that was released at the weekend, which I enjoyed listening to, and it reminded me that I met Jody Craddock and Neil Wainwright there. They were very good friends, apparently. Neil Wainwright as well. Really nice lad. Yeah. So, happy memories of Craddock, both as a player and on that time I got to meet him.
Because if you listen to the pod, Neil Wainwright had a picture of himself in the background, and I actually went, "Oh, that's a brilliant photo, that." And he went, "No, that's one of Jody Craddock's things."
Well, Chris, that was what reminded me that I was very fortunate to get that invite, and I spoke to them both on the night. His artwork is phenomenal. Forget what he's like as a defender. I mean, he's top 10 artists were ever at the club. I don't mean piss artists either. I mean actual artists.
He wouldn't stand a chance on that front.
No,
I don't think. Right. Well, that's it. So we've got through. We've discussed the lads' top 10s. Now, taking all the averages, because it's a real strange one. People Johnny trying to pull John Mensah up the table as much as possible. So on average, the top 10 for the three lads' picks are in number 10, Stanislav Varga, number 9, Emerson Tome, number 8, Michael Turner, number 7, Luke O'Nien, 6, Yunus Kabul, number 5, John Mensah, number 4, John O'Shea, 3rd was Jody Craddock, 2nd, Johnny Evans, and top of the pops was Steve Bould. So that was the top 10 on average between the three lads' picks. And just because I got asked to do it beforehand and I forgot on the last one, I'm going to remember this time. So my top 10, if anyone at all was interested, I did have Steve Bould at top, Johnny Evans in second, then Jody Craddock, then I had John Mensah, then Yunus Kabul, then Emerson Tome, then Michael Turner, Luke O'Nien, John O'Shea, And then I had Stanislav Varga. So that was my 10, just out of interest. So as we've gone on probably way longer than we planned, and we are absolutely melting on there. This and Johnny Blue, there you've stripped out and just your vest, haven't you?
I've got to give the people what they want. You know what I mean?
Just a good job we're not sticking the video out on this, and it's audio, isn't it? But Johnny, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll take the victory, the moral victory, because I've dragged Mensa up into the top 5 overall. So I'm happy.
Yep, clever lad, genius, mate. Well done. And Andrew, always a pleasure, mate.
Yes, thanks, mate. I've enjoyed that one. Good fun, boys.
Yeah, and Calvin, thank you very much for your time, mate.
Thanks for having us on. Great.
Good stuff. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Of course, keep a look out on Roker Report website for all of the news that should be going on, because we're just waiting for these signings onward to drop. There's just rumours flying around everywhere, and we want some to drop, but it'll be on the Roker Report website, so have a look out on that. And of course, Gav dragged me out of bed at the weekend. On the phone, by the way.
I was going to say, I'm meant to be Johnny.
I saw your face there. When reacting to what's going on, so there will be daily releases on How We're the Podcast. But from us, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.